All right, we are here today with Bubba Harsy, the Libertarian candidate for Attorney General. We appreciate you being here today and invite you to start by providing an opening statement as to why you're running for this office and why you think you're the best candidate.
The biggest reason I'm running for Attorney General is to try and bring back government accountability to Illinois. I feel like that is the biggest problem we have right now. I feel like that is the driving force encouraging, borderline forcing thousands of people out of the state every year. In holding the government accountable for their bad acts, I believe that sets the example to other government officials and government employees that corrupt behavior is no longer tolerated in Illinois. Rod Blagojevich recently wrote a letter, I don't remember which paper he submitted it to, but basically saying he should be let out of prison because everybody does that, and it's just typical behavior. To me, that doesn't create any sympathy for me to let Rod Blagojevich out of prison. It just tells me that we absolutely need to send him company. Another major issue I'd like to take on will be the property taxes. Right now, property taxes are some of the money that's being generated by property taxes is being shifted to pay off local government retiree pensions. A majority of property tax money is supposed to be used for schools, and at this point, in order for communities to just barely pay off their pension debt obligations, they are taking property tax money, and that's part of the reason Illinois property taxes are the highest in the nation. Another big issue I'd like to take on in dealing with taxes and government corruption is pension reform. I feel like part of the reason we have our pensions escalating out of control is there's not any government accountability. People are being able to generate extra money for retirees by stealing money from property taxes. Article 1, Section 16 of the Illinois Constitution prevents the government from giving out irrevocable grants of special privileges. Right now, the highest paid government retiree makes $598,000 a year. They've only paid in $768,000 into their own retirement plan, and they're expected to draw over $21 million. That's why Illinois doesn't have any money, and I believe by nullifying those unconstitutional pensions and allowing legislators to renegotiate pensions that are fair to taxpayers is the simplest, best way to move forward and get Illinois back on track.
Okay, so let's talk more about this pension idea you have. Are you saying pensions that have been earned are not valid?
I'm saying the government did not have the authority to give out irrevocable grants of special privileges. In 2015, the Illinois Supreme Court heard on the matter about whether or not there can be legitimate pension reform. They said that the Pension Protection Clause prevents the government from going back on any deals that are made with pensions. Article 1, Section 16, the front part of the Illinois Constitution, more important matters go in the front part of constitutions. It says the government's not allowed to give out irrevocable grants of special privileges. To me, whenever pensions are only paying in, pensioners are only paying in 2%, 3%, 4%, and then what they're getting back, basically getting everything back in the span of 2 years, that's not a legitimate pension. That's an unconstitutional special privilege for former government affiliation. It's not very nice to tell people that because it's unfortunate that their government officials and legislators lied to them about what is financially practical going forward. But in reality, they're special privileges. There's nothing else seen like that in the private sector. Right now, according to the Taxpayer Education Foundation, for every dollar a government retiree puts into their retirement system, taxpayers are putting in $4.50. Private sector is not going to give you a 450% match on your pension or whatever you're actually setting aside yourself. So to me, it is not a very nice way to go about resolving issues, but it is a way to resolve issues going forward.
So this is something, as Attorney General, you would pursue within the court system, within the legislature? How would you go about?
This is something I would pursue in the court system. Okay. It's going to basically come down to, are what government retirees receiving, are they legitimate pensions, or are they basically mathematically impossible to the point they're special privileges? Right now, we have over a dozen retirees making twice as much as the governor does retired. They get a 3% raise every single year. Those pensioners, I'd like to see their pensions cut in half. General Assembly members, they're part-time elected officials. I don't think they deserve a pension at all, and I'd like to see their pensions taken away and not replaced. The issue becomes problematic whenever you're dealing with teachers, people in the state university system, inmates. I don't want to see those people, or security guards, sorry, not inmates. Okay. I don't want to see those people left high and dry. But the 3% cost of living adjustment going forward, allowing people to have their pensions double within 24 years, that's not financially practical going forward. It's not possible to sustain something like that. Right now, 25% of the budget in Illinois is for pensions. And then there's more money even being spent on the local levels whenever state officials send money to local communities, and that money's also being used to pay for pensions. It's unfortunate that the last couple of governors we've had been sent to prison and are notoriously known for their corruption, but we can't pretend at the same time that, yes, they are felons, they did wrong things, but then pretend like everything else they did is on the up and up. And I feel like that's kind of what we're dealing right now. People have been promised these pensions. They were lied to about what is actually practical going forward. And I think the simplest way to resolve this issue is nullify unconstitutional pensions and renegotiate them in a way that's fair to taxpayers.
So there would still be people who have retired and are earning their pension now. They would still get some sort of compensation.
Correct.
You're not saying to completely take away whatever they've saved that they're retiring.
From the initial aspect up front, you would have to nullify.
Okay.
The Illinois Supreme Court has said all or nothing. We can't chip away. So yes, we would have to nullify them completely and then rely on legislators and the governor to renegotiate them that are fair to taxpayers. That being said, if an individual is retired and they don't want to wait for a court case to play out, if they want to step aside from the unions and renegotiate a pension on their own behalf, I think that is a great idea as well. I want people to get something, but at the same time, you can't put it on taxpayers to match $4.50 for every dollar that goes into the retirement system.
Okay, and can you remind me what study that was? You said that 1 to 450.
That is the Taxpayer Education Foundation.
Okay. Just going back, this is the first time this office has been open in 16 years, where it's an open seat. How would you rate the job of the current Attorney General, Lisa Madigan?
In regards to consumer protection, she's done well. There's no argument there. In regards to government accountability and prosecuting government corruption, she has dropped the ball drastically. Going forward, I would like to continue with the consumer complaints that she's laid out so far in protecting consumers, but I would also like to open up and start protecting people from the government of Illinois. And even if we can't criminally prosecute them, we can remove bad actors pursuant to the Quo Warranto Act. It's a civil proceeding. It doesn't allow for any fines. It doesn't allow for any criminal sentences. But at the same time, it is an avenue to get rid of bad actors in the state of Illinois. And if we can eliminate bad actors, then hopefully somebody will replace them with the right intentions and are involved in government for the right reasons.
Can you give a specific example? You say you feel she's dropped the ball when it comes to government corruption. Is there a specific one you have in mind?
Not really. From what I've seen, the Attorney General's office is made aware of local matters, and they just really don't pursue them. The Edgar County Watch Group, they have sent multiple, basically gift-wrap presents of corruption saying, hey, here it is, prosecute it. And the Attorney General's office defers to prosecute. There was a local matter involving the Perry County Sheriff's Office where the school resource officer received about 10 warnings to stop bothering high school girls. Even had a mother show up and complain that the cop had sex with her 16-year-old daughter. Tried to get some records with this, got some FOIA records from the sheriff's office, wasn't enough. There was other stuff that was there, sent it off to the Attorney General's office, and they said, yeah, things don't seem right, but since he's been forced to resign now at this point, they've met their minimum legal qualifications. If you would like to pursue this matter and criminally prosecute yourself, you're more than welcome. I would love to be able to have the resources personally to just go out and prosecute every single person in the state of Illinois that's committing wrongful behavior. But whenever I make my sheriff's office aware, my state's attorney's office aware, and my attorney general's office aware, and they don't take action on it, it's very, very problematic. And from speaking with people, it's not isolated to just my county, unfortunately.
Okay. Your campaign website said that since the early 1990s, you feel the Illinois Attorney General, whomever it was, has failed to take government corruption seriously. That would be starting with Roland Burris. Is there something specific you have in mind where he didn't take it seriously?
Nothing specific, but the fact that he was appointed by Rod Blagojevich to replace Barack Obama's Senate seat, the same Senate seat that sent Blagojevich to prison for selling, that creates an issue to me. It might not be black and white, but if the former Attorney General played well enough, I guess, to put himself in a position to purchase a United States Senate maybe purchase a United States Senate seat, but Rod Blagojevich was absolutely sent to prison for selling. That's a big issue to me, and I feel like that kind of says a lot in and of itself, even though there's not a specific issue. But Roland Burris was called to step down by Senator Dick Durbin and other big Democrats in the party, and he refused to step down. I believe the other Democrats calling for him to step down is a reflection of kind of the issues in which he was able to obtain the United States Senate seat.
Okay. What about Jim Ryan? He would have followed Burris. Is there an area there you thought he fell down
I
in?
feel like if he was actually looking out for the interests of the people of Illinois, then George Ryan doesn't get to create issues as Secretary of State and doesn't get to create issues as governor. I feel like it is on the state to watch out for the state government. We have got to get away from the system of relying on the federal government to prosecute all of our corruption cases. I believe that is the role of the Attorney General. If there's one position in the state of Illinois to prosecute government corruption, it is the office of the Attorney General, and we have got to get away from the system of the federal government taking charge, because to me, once the federal government's aware, a lot of other people are aware, and it's something could have been done years in advance whenever it finally takes the federal government to get involved.
Your website says, and as we've been talking here, you would want to make efforts to eliminate the corruption plaguing our state. So, I mean, how do you accomplish that?
The Attorney General's Act gives the Attorney General the power to give advice to state's attorneys, and it can also direct state's attorneys on how to handle some affairs. The Attorney General Act also gives the Attorney General the option to assist the state's attorneys of the county in any way possible. So to me, if I'm elected, I would like to develop and start having meetings with the state's attorney's office or state's attorneys of the respective counties, and basically say, hey, we're going to make an effort to prosecute government corruption going forward, and the Attorney General's office is here to help in any way possible. But while also letting them know that, hey, if you're not on board to prosecute government corruption, then we're going to look to have you removed from office via the Quo Warranto Act, because if you're not adhering to your duties objectively and your responsibilities, and those duties and responsibilities are to prosecute government corruption, then we're going to remove you from office and try to get a state's attorney in there that's willing to work for the people of Illinois.
And you think you'd be able to do that under that act?
Absolutely. I have the legal authority to have any discussions with the state's attorney about advising them to what they should be doing, in my opinion, and they have counterpoint. They can ask my office for any assistance in prosecuting matters. If a state's attorney tells me, hey, we got this corruption going on, I'm going to use all the resources the Attorney General's office has to prosecute government corruption.
Do you think the Attorney General's office under you would have the resources needed to work with 102 counties?
I believe so. I'd like to back off the aspect of criminal prosecution of marijuana to some degree, or it's not worth the Attorney General's time to prosecute marijuana charges. There are bigger issues in Illinois. Backing off some of that, I believe, will free up resources. There are currently around 800 employees that work for the Attorney General's office, and they have a budget of over $80 million. They have the resources there if they're utilized correctly. Also, something else I would like to do if elected Attorney General would be back off some of the state regulations. I would like to see Illinois become more business friendly. I don't believe that Illinois state regulations should be the strictest out of the 50 states. I don't believe Illinois regulations should be stricter than federal regulations. There is one area where I would like to see Illinois have stricter regulations, that being said, and that involves companies that collect personal information. If they have a data breach, I believe they should disclose it to the people's information they have within 72 hours. Right now, they're just supposed to disclose it as soon as possible, but there's not any timelines and there's not any real punishments if you don't meet those timelines. Recently, the European Union has moved towards a 72-hour disclosure requirement, and Mark Zuckerberg has spoke on behalf of Facebook in front of Congress saying a 72-hour requirement would not be too much for Facebook. I feel like Illinois going forward should try to actively work towards a 72-hour disclosure requirement, but that would take action from the legislators.
Okay. Kind of that's the same area, the backing off some restrictions and regulations. In your campaign literature, you say you want to make Illinois more business friendly. How would you do that as Attorney General? Like, what powers would you have to help with that?
I mean, they enforce a lot of regulations in Illinois and look out for people's interests. But sometimes I feel like the Attorney General's office looks out for people's interests too much to the point that they harm private businesses. Right now in Illinois, if you're a private business and you have a second-story with more than 900 square feet, you're supposed to have an elevator to give people with disabilities access to the second story. That sounds nice in theory, but at the same time, that is a big burden to put on small businesses for more than 900 square feet. California is the next strictest state, and they have a requirement of 2,000 square feet. So if California is the strictest state with a requirement of 2,000 square feet and Illinois is at 900 square feet, that's harming business interests. The federal government, their restriction is 2,000 square feet. I feel like that is an appropriate way. That would be an appropriate middle ground. Meet with the federal government requirements of 2,000 square feet in that instance. And there's other instances like that. But going forward, just little changes like that and backing off the enforcement of those regulations, that's going to free up other resources for the Attorney General's office to focus on matters that are more pressing for Illinois.
Okay. What types of criminal justice reform would you as Attorney General advocate for?
Longer penalties for government corruption, longer statute of limitations for government corruption.
What are they? I guess what are the limits now that you think should be longer?
I want to say right now, the criminal aspect is only maybe 3 years. I mean, depending on what's going on.
Sure.
I mean, murder's open forever, but that's not really open to public corruption.
Yeah.
I would also like to see the offenses more of the thing. I don't know how to phrase this, I guess. Right now, if a General Assembly member is caught taking money that's not their salary for doing duties as a General Assembly member, it's a petty offense. It's the equivalent of a parking ticket. So if you bribe a General Assembly member under that provision right now, it's just a petty offense. Bribery is still on the books, but at the same time, it's more difficult to prove bribery than it would be for anti-corruption laws. But right now, if you can prove that a General Assembly member is being corrupt, taking money they're not supposed to be taking, it's a petty offense. At that rate, it's almost not worth prosecuting because what are they going to pay, a $100 fine, $200 fine max, and it's not even doing anything. It's not setting an example for other bad acting government officials.
Okay, you mentioned this, you mentioned decriminalizing pot. Are there other areas of criminal justice reform, like the length of prison sentences, use of various types of court, like mental health courts?
I would like to see...
Where would you fall for some of those other areas?
I mean, I feel like marijuana should be legalized to the point that it's not worth the Attorney General's time prosecuting those cases. But in regards to meth and heroin, I feel like those issues should be treated more like mental health issues going forward. I don't feel like you really help the meth addict by locking them up in prison for 10 years, not really providing them any support, not really providing them any educational opportunities or psychiatric evaluations, and just expecting them to get better. I mean, there is a point in time where people need to sit in prison, but going forward, I would like to try to help these people with redevelopment programs, trying to get them jobs coming out. I feel like right now we're in an archaic notion of people that are doing drugs or just criminals, but I mean, they usually have other problems going on in their life, and I'd like to see the state try to help those people and not just lock them up.
Okay.
And then in regards to government accountability and criminal justice reform, I feel like going forward in Illinois, we also need to start holding people that protect others from the crimes they committed, hold them accountable as accessories. I mean, if you help cover up a crime for her, to me, you should both be prosecuted as you being the accomplice. And I feel like at this point in time, people that look the other way or try to help cover up acts, for whatever reason, they get the benefit of the doubt and they're not prosecuted or brought into the system just like everybody else is.
Is there like a high-profile case you have in mind in that? Or
no, but...
it's just what's on the books?
Kind of just what's on the books in general, and just personal experience seeing how things operate in my community. It's people look the other way, and for whatever they get the free pass. Something that's, I feel like, gaining a little bit of attention at this point, but the New York Post recently came out with something saying that the Clinton Foundation, the Democratic National Committee, is involved with over 40 state Democrat committees, and they're supposedly money laundered over like $86 million. If that is the case, then to me that opens up the avenue for federal racketeering laws, and anybody affiliated with any of that could be criminally prosecuted. And I feel like the people that have actually actively tried to cover that stuff up should be held accountable as well. That being said, pursuing criminal matters, pursuing public corruption, it should be based on objective facts. I don't want to waste resources of taxpayers with political witch hunts. I don't believe that resolves anything for the people of Illinois, and it's just kind of wasted time, energy, and effort for somebody to obtain some sort of recognition.
On your campaign website, I saw the education portion, and you noted you would like to change the school board for Chicago Public Schools. Right now, it's appointed by the mayor. You'd like it to be elected. I guess that's not necessarily an area where I feel the Attorney General would play a role. Why do you think that's something you would focus on?
I'll agree with you for the most part on that. I mean, the Attorney General is not going to be able to challenge any laws.
Yeah.
I could actively try to lobby with groups and say, hey, pretty much what you're doing is you're taking the voice away from the people. And it may or may not be unconstitutional, but at the same time, most of that efforts from my end would be just public policy, just encouraging other legislators as well as aldermen in Chicago and the mayor to say, hey, we got to do something to fix this. I know that's easier said than done. The problems are deeply ingrained in Chicago, but at the same time, that is a position I have because I feel like the more you allow people to make their own decisions and the more individuals in Illinois have a say-so in things, the better the state's going to be in the long run. When we isolate powers to a select few in the state of Illinois, I feel like that's when things go wrong, and I feel like that's kind of why things have went wrong for the last several decades.
Have you had any conversations with anyone about that? I mean, like specifically Chicago aldermen or Chicago area legislators. They would be the ones you'd need the support from.
Oh, I know, but I mean, at this point, I haven't spoke with them, but I mean, that is a position something I came across and really feel like is problematic in Chicago.
Okay. You also noted under your education section that you would like to work toward consolidation of school districts. Again, it's certainly something this edit board I think would agree with you with on the need to consolidate, but not necessarily something I think of it to the Attorney General's office playing a role. So why would this be one you would champion?
I mean, agreeing with you again, I mean, the Attorney General's not going to be able to enforce or challenge any laws and claiming they're unconstitutional in regards to help that system, but I feel like by the Attorney General's office taking that position going forward, it may help to close down some school districts and, I mean, some of the overlap's what's causing the problems with our finances. It's not legitimate school districts out doing their thing. It's whenever you have 3 or 4 school districts within a county where each school district basically is in charge of one school. That's a problem.
Yeah, okay. You had a fiscal responsibility section on your website, which is always an interesting topic to this edit board. How would you, I guess, share some ideas you have with us about how the state can be more fiscally responsible?
First aspect, going towards pensions.
Yeah.
Nullifying unconstitutional pensions and renegotiating to where they're fair to the taxpayers. While I believe that General Assembly members should not have pensions because they're part-time elected officials, even managing to not allow them to draw pensions until they're 65 and maybe require 12 years of service will go a long way for the people of Illinois. Right now, state officials are able to draw a pension if they've been elected for 8 years once they turn 55. They're able to draw pensions after 4 years once they turn 62. That's a problem. Like, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. In the private sectors, nobody's going to start paying out pensions after you've worked for 4 years. And that's also guaranteed. They could be elected to the General Assembly when they're 40, leave when they're 44, and then once they turn 62, they get a pension. I feel like by taking away wasted resources like that, it'll go a long way. Something I support that wouldn't necessarily be the role of the Attorney General would be a pay scale for the state of Illinois employees, equivalent to about what the federal government does. Right now, the Secretary of State for the United States makes about $210,000. The Attorney General for the United States makes about $205,000. Why are we having state employees making $300,000, $400,000 whenever their federal counterparts aren't even making half that much? I feel like that's where the out-of-control corruption in Illinois is, these outlandish salaries to people for doing jobs that are, I mean, they're very important jobs, don't get me wrong, but they're not worthy of being paid that much. And that's unfortunate, but that's kind of where our money's going right now, is the people on the low end of the government hierarchy are not getting paid enough, and rightfully so, they're not happy. But the people on the high end of the government hierarchy are getting paid outlandish salaries. And working towards a salary cap equivalent to what the federal government has, I believe will help make the state of Illinois a little more fiscally responsible.
Are you talking about for all salary caps for all employees, for union members, for
that would be in the state. I mean, most likely in the state system. But I mean, if you're a state employee, it's inexcusable for you to make over $250,000 to me. It's just how I feel. And I mean, to the people that don't like hearing that, it is what it is. I mean, right now, the average government state employee in Illinois as of 2016 makes about $61,000 a year. In 2016, the average household makes about $59,000, almost $60,000 a year. In 2014, the average state employee was making $60,000 a year. So as of right now, if you're a government employee, your income is on par with the average household in Illinois. That is corruption. I mean, whether people feel like it is or not, but whenever literally a government employee on average is making just as much as a household, there's a problem with the numbers. And if we don't address those numbers, we're going to be knocking on the door for a federal bailout.
I want to clarify, you're comparing the family making the same amount as a single employee, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. You also talk about healthcare reform. On your website. Healthcare, I think most people think of as a federal issue of late, given the Affordable Care Act, its implementation, the attempts to rescind it. What can be done at the state level that you're advocating for?
I believe that my First Amendment right to freely associate with organizations is more important than the state of Illinois' right to have a monopoly on health insurance, or allow companies to have monopolies on health insurance. I believe by breaking down the barriers that prevent people from crossing state lines to purchase health insurance, we're going to see a consumer-driven market, and we're going to have healthcare costs drop. Somebody I spoke with, a friend, somebody I consider a friend, the Affordable Care Act allowed them to purchase health insurance across state lines for a brief amount of time, and they were paying not quite $400 a month for their health insurance. Whenever that was removed from the Affordable Care Act, their health insurance jumped up to over $700. I feel like part of the problem is because corporations in Illinois know that they don't really have to compete with anybody. The politicians pass the regulations that are kind of unique to that company, and the company knows how to play games with those regulations. They make the proper donations to the right political candidates, and they bog down competition. In 1945, the McCarran-Ferguson Act was passed, and that was the federal government in response to a United States Supreme Court case where the United States Supreme Court said antitrust laws do apply to insurance companies. Congress controls them through the Commerce Clause. The federal government Congress said, hey, you're right, we do control insurance laws based on the Commerce Clause, and we're going to say that antitrust laws don't apply to insurance companies. States can have monopolies if they want to. So basically, since 1945, we've had this system where states have the right to have monopolies on health insurance. And maybe in 1945, when everything was filled out on paper, you had to mail things, maybe it made sense then. But now in 2018, with everybody that normally intakes information puts it in a computer. I mean, you guys are writing. I feel like you guys are the exception to the rule, but personally I like to handwrite things. But if you go sit down with a health insurance company, they're punching everything into a computer system. It's being uploaded, and basically the figures are figured, and then they give them back to you. I don't feel like we need a monopoly on state health insurance companies anymore going forward, and any reason the government might think they have is less important than my First Amendment right to freely associate with organizations as I choose.
Can you affect change, though, as a state's attorney when a lot of that is set in Congress?
If those laws are, I mean, it would be a lengthy court case.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies are going to fund their local officials, and they're going to fight me tooth and nail on that. That being said, it would end up being a judicial question. Is it more pressing for a state government to have monopolies on health insurance, or is it more pressing to allow people to have the First Amendment right to associate with businesses that they choose? I'm on the side to believe that it's more pressing for my First Amendment rights, but it would be a judicial decision.
Okay. Another area on your website I was looking at was police reform. You note that all police officers should wear body cams. I feel there's a lot of departments that would like to do that but can't afford it. How would you work to get the funding to get not only, because it's not only the original equipment, it's the storage of videos, it's not just a one-time purchase, or expense. How would you help get these on every police officer?
The funding issue in Illinois is always going to be problematic.
Yeah.
Our dollars are spent before we get them. I believe by chipping away at pensions, it's going to free up a lot of dollars. Whether people like that or not, I believe it needs to be done. Something else I find problematic with the police body cameras, I've had a family member that was a cop, and I spoke to him. I was like, every police officer should have body cameras. Why don't they have them? And he's like, well, the departments would like to have them, but some of the upfront costs are $3,000 to $4,000 for a body camera. I was like, why? I was like, at this point in time, I think they were talking about putting cameras in cell phones for about $5 a piece. I was like, why in the world is this going on? And he said they've already made the contracts where they have to purchase these police body cameras through these suppliers. I feel like by starting to hold bad acting government employees accountable, some of these crony deals will start to go away. But I mean, you're right though. In regards to storing information, that is an expensive, that is a cost. But I believe having police officers wear body cameras, it helps protect the police officers as well as protect the average citizen. Police officer, sometimes people make claims that police officers did something awful, and it's just completely made up, not true. In those instances, it allows those problems to be resolved quickly, and police officers don't have to deal with those issues. But at the same time, sometimes police officers lie about what actually happened, and the body cameras prevent us from dealing with those issues and help resolve those issues. But it is a cost, but I believe by holding government employees accountable and working to get rid of unconstitutional pensions, the money will be there for that.
Okay.
But again, that's not a direct issue for the Attorney General's office, but it would be something I would try to work with towards lawmakers and the governor.
Okay. How a lot of these things you're talking to us about would require changes in the legislature. How would you go about building coalitions to support your initiatives?
Reaching out and starting with a phone call and saying, hey, do you have any interest doing this going forward? There are some legislators that I would consider more vocal on advocating for the individual rights of the people of Illinois, and those are people I would reach out to first. In dealing with trying to actually get something through the legislature, I mean, you have to reach out to Mike Madigan, whether you like that or not. You have to have contact with him. But at the same time, I would also like to reach out to the people that are, and there's a very short list of people that actually don't vote for Mike Madigan as Speaker of the House. I feel like that's not a bad starting point as well. But by starting on opposite ends of the spectrum, I feel like hopefully we could find something in the middle to allow something to get passed that's fair and practical to the people of Illinois.
Okay. We're talking here about corruption, conflicts of interest, things like that. Tell us broadly who you receive campaign contributions from.
At this point, I've just been funding myself.
Okay.
So I've had a couple small cash donations from people, but I believe that's no more than $60.
Okay, so none from either tobacco companies or public utilities?
No.
Okay. Are you in favor of term limits for elected officials?
Very much so.
What kind of term limits?
Like a length of time or...
Either how many terms, length of time, for what offices?
For General Assembly members, I wouldn't want to see them in there longer than 16 years. Other states have used that as kind of the average go-to, and it seems like it's working well for them. Arguably, 16 years might be a little long, but at the same time, it's a step in the right direction. And I would include that for 16 hours either in the House or in the Senate or a combination of the two.
So not 16 years in the House, then 16 years in the Senate.
No. Okay. And then also for leadership positions, which to me, I would like to think that term limits wouldn't be required for leadership because the state reps and the Senate members that are going there, I'd like to believe, are intelligent and educated, and they would be able to identify problems in leadership and remove them from office, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So I would also like to see term limits for voted leadership in the General Assembly as well, not to exceed 16 years.
Total. So if you were elected Speaker of the House in your 12th year, your 16 years wouldn't restart over?
No,
okay.
You would have 4 years at that point.
Okay.
The term limits for General Assembly members would trump any other term limits.
What about for statewide constitutional offices, like the one you're running for?
I'd like to see 2 years, or two term limits, two terms.
Okay.
I feel like if you can't resolve anything in 8 years, you're not going to resolve it in 12.
There's been a number of attorney generals from around the country, including Lisa Madigan, who have challenged the Trump administration in court over various issues. Are there any circumstances in which you think you would challenge the federal government?
In dealing primarily with immigration issues.
Yeah.
Right now, I feel like Donald Trump is trying to make state officials, trying to commandeer state officials of Illinois and make them do federal bidding. I believe that's unconstitutional according to the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, and I do not want to see the state of Illinois and their employees bullied by Trump to do Trump's bidding. If he wants Illinois state officials to take action on immigration matters, then I believe he needs to provide sufficient funding to do that. Also, involving ICE detainers, the biggest problem I have with ICE detainers, the biggest upfront problem I have with ICE detainers is right now, if the federal government tells a local state official that this person is suspected of being an undocumented immigrant, you need to detain them. Well, that person is in jail for 2 weeks, 2 years, just depending, and it turns out they're an American citizen that was wrongfully detained, then that person hires an attorney and rightfully sues. They try to sue the federal government and they try to sue the state government. The federal government avoids liability by saying that we do not have the legal authority to make state officials do that. We asked them and they decided to do it. They literally make the argument that we don't have the power because of the 10th Amendment. The state says we actually only tried to do this because the federal government told us and the federal government gave us faulty information. And the federal government takes the position that we asked you politely. We didn't make you. You're on your own. So the states are held accountable for bad advice from the federal government. I spent some time working in the Maryland State Senate, and that was a big issue we had going on out there. Maryland was trying to move away from that because there had been issues where they had improperly locked up American citizens based on bad information for ICE detainers, and the state of Maryland was held liable, and the federal government missed out on liability for making that claim. But if the state was allowed to have the authority to handle that, I would like to see, if somebody's been here for 20 years or so, haven't committed any crimes or contributing to their local communities, then I would like to see maybe a civil penalty or something like that to make up for any hypothetical lost revenue from the last 20 years and allow those people to stay in the United States. People that are committing legitimate crimes, I would like to see them deported immediately, non-negotiable, and basically in between the no crimes in 20 years, I'd like to see handled on a case-by-case basis. But that being said, that's outside the state's authority at this point.
Okay. A key part to the Attorney General's office that we certainly take a lot of interest in is ensuring the Freedom of Information and the Open Meeting Acts are not being violated by other governmental entities. How would you ensure you're holding them accountable for that?
I would actually like to see local state officials held a little more accountable whenever they're dealing with FOIA requests. I feel like right now, from personal experience, I was dealing with an administrative agency that wasn't being as truthful about the records they were releasing, and involving the school resource officer. Did I bring that up here? I'm trying to think if it was this interview or
the one with possible relationship issues. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I brought that up through the Attorney General's office through a FOIA appeal, where they said, yeah, maybe it seems a little suspicious. You can prosecute it yourself if you want to. To me, if they can take the position that maybe things seem suspicious, then they should be able to take the position and remove bad acting government officials through the quo warranto proceedings. I feel like when you make the PAC appeal, the Attorney General's office needs more teeth when they're dealing with that, potentially handing out civil penalties and trying to remove bad actors, because to me, the Attorney General's office dealing with the FOIA appeal really only works if the administrative agency is being honest and has legitimate questions about disclosing information. But if you're dealing with a dishonest administrative agency, to me, filing an appeal to the Attorney General's office is more or less a waste of time, because they're going to defer to what the government has done and say that's what it is, and if you want to prosecute yourself, you can.
And you said civil penalties you would be interested in?
Civil penalties. Right now, if you bring a judicial complaint about FOIA, the administrative agency risks a $2,500 civil penalty for each occurrence of them violating FOIA. I'd like to see maybe a slightly reduced penalty, but give the Attorney General's office the option to try to enforce those penalties. Because I feel like right now, if you have a bad acting government official, they don't do FOIA appropriately, you go through the lengthy appeal process in the Attorney General's office that wastes everybody's resources, and the Attorney General's office isn't really going to investigate, or they can't really investigate what's going on, and then the local state or the local administrative agencies, I feel like, get a free pass, even though the Attorney General's office is fully aware that they're not acting appropriately.
Do you think then the Attorney General's office needs additional tools in order to do this job, like additional powers or authority?
No, the Quo Warranto Act gives them the power and authority to do that, to remove bad acting government officials that are not adhering to their duties and responsibilities.
Okay.
It's already there. We just have to use that provision.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, we thank you for meeting with us today and invite you to give a brief closing statement as to why you should be the next Attorney General for the state.
Going forward, I would like to bring government accountability back to Illinois. I would like to see legitimate pension reform that is fair to the taxpayers of Illinois. I'd like to see term limits. I'd like to see a reduction in property taxes. I just want to bring back government accountability to Illinois, and that starts by holding government officials accountable for their bad acts. It's what we need, is what the people of Illinois deserve, and I would like to be the Attorney General going forward that works for the people of Illinois rather than the government of Illinois. The people make up the government. The government is dependent upon the people, and I feel like some of our leaders are confused that the government's more important than the people, and that's just simply not the case. I believe by changing the status quo going forward, the more libertarians we could get involved in elected positions, I believe the better chances the people of Illinois have from recovering from what we've been going through for the last several decades, and hopefully stop moving out of the state by the tens of thousands every year.